this is Krystal, and thank you for joining me for this week's First Chapter Friday. Today, I will be continuing our Brandon Sanderson series with The Way of Kings, Book 1 of the Stormlight Archive. Prelude to the Stormlight Archive. Kalak rounded a rocky stone ridge and stumbled to a stop before the body of a dying thunderclast. The enormous stone beast lay on its side, rib-like protrusions from its chest broken and cracked. The monstrosity was vaguely skeletal in shape, with unnaturally long limbs that sprouted from granite shoulders. The eyes were deep red spots on the arrowhead face, as if created by a fire burning deep within the stone. They faded. Even after all these centuries, seeing a thunderclast up close made Kalak shiver. The beast's hand was as long as a man was tall. He'd been killed by hands like those before, and it hadn't been pleasant. Of course, dying rarely was. He rounded the creature, picking his way more carefully across the battlefield. The plain was a place of misshapen rock and stone. Natural pillars rising around him, bodies littering the ground. Few plants lived here. The stone ridges and mounds bore numerous scars. Some were shattered, blasted out sections where surge binders had fought. Less frequently, he passed cracked, oddly shaped hollows, where thunderclasts had ripped themselves free of the stone to join the fray. Many of the bodies around him were human. Many were not. Blood mixed. Red, orange, violet. Though none of the bodies around him stirred, an indistinct haze of sounds hung in the air. Moans of pain, cries of grief. They did not seem like the sounds of victory. Smoke curled from the occasional patches of growth or heaps of burning corpses. Even some sections of rock smoldered. The Deathbringers had done their work well. But I survived, Kalak thought, hand to breast, as he hastened to the meeting place. I actually survived this time. That was dangerous. When he died, he was sent back. No choice. When he survived the desolation, he was supposed to go back as well. Back to that place that he dreaded. Back to that place of pain and fire. What if he just decided not to go? Perilous thoughts. Perhaps traitorous thoughts. He hastened on his way. The place of meeting was in the shadow of a large rock formation, a spire rising into the sky. As always, the 10 of them had decided upon it before the battle. The survivors would make their way here. Oddly, only one of the others was waiting for him. Jezrien. Had the other 8 all died? It was possible. The battle had been so furious this time. One of the worst. The enemy was growing increasingly tenacious. But no. Kalak frowned as he stepped up to the base of the spire. 7 magnificent swords stood proudly there, driven point first into the stone ground. Each was a masterly work of art, flowing in design, inscribed with glyphs and patterns. He recognized each one. If their masters had died, the blades would have vanished. These blades were weapons of power beyond even shard blades. These were unique, precious. Jezrien stood outside the ring of swords, looking eastward. Jezrien? The figure in white and blue glanced toward him. Even after all these centuries, Jezrien looked young, like a man barely into his 30th year. His short black beard was neatly trimmed, though his once fine clothing was scorched and stained with blood. He folded his arms behind his back as he turned to Kalak. What is this, Jezrien? Kalak asked. Where are the others? Departed. Jezrien's voice was calm, deep, regal. Though he hadn't worn a crown in centuries, his royal manner lingered. He always seemed to know what to do. You might call it a miracle. Only one of us died this time. Talonel, Kalak said. He was the only blade unaccounted for. Yes. He died holding that passage by the northern waterway. Kalak nodded. Talon had a tendency to choose seemingly hopeless fights and win them. He also had a tendency to die in the process. He would be back now, in the place where they went between desolations, the place of nightmares. Kalak found himself shaking. When had he become so weak? Yezrian, I can't return this time. Kalak whispered the words, stepping up and gripping the other man's arms. I can't. Kalak felt something within him break at the admission. How long had it been? Centuries? Perhaps millennia of torture. It was so hard to keep track. Those fires, those hooks, digging into his flesh anew each day, searing the skin off his arm, then burning the fat, then driving to the bone. He could smell it. Almighty, he could smell it. Leave your sword, Yezrian said. What? Yezrian nodded to the ring of weapons. I was chosen to wait for you. We weren't certain if you had survived. A decision has been made. It is time for the Oath Pact to end. Kalak felt a sharp stab of horror. What will that do? Ishar believes that so long as there is one of us still bound to the Oath Pact, it may be enough. There is a chance we might end the cycle of desolations. Kalak looked into the immortal king's eyes. Black smoke rose from a small patch to their left. Groans of the dying haunted them from behind. There, in Yezrian's eyes, Kalak saw anguish and grief, perhaps even cowardice. This was a man hanging from a cliff by a thread. Almighty above, Kalak thought. You're broken too, aren't you? They all were. Kalak turned and walked to the side, where a low ridge overlooked part of the battlefield. There were so many corpses, and among them walked the living, men in primitive wraps, carrying spears topped by bronze heads. Juxtaposed between them were others in gleaming plate armor. One group walked past, 4 men in the ragged tan skins or shoddy leather joining, a powerful figure in beautiful silver plate, amazingly intricate. Such a contrast. Yezrian stepped up beside him. They see us as divinities, Kalak whispered. They rely upon us, Yezrian. We're all that they have. They have the radiance. That will be enough. Kalak shook his head. He will not remain bound by this. The enemy. He will find a way around it. You know he will. Perhaps. The King of Heralds offered no further explanation. And Talon? Kalak asked. The flesh burning, the fires, the pain over and over and over. Better that one man should suffer than 10, Yezrian whispered. He seemed so cold, like a shadow caused by heat and light falling on someone honorable and true, casting this black imitation behind. Yezrian walked back to the ring of swords, his own blade formed in his hands, appearing from mist, wet with condensation. It has been decided, Kalak. We will go our ways, and we will not seek out one another. Our blades must be left. The Oath Pact ends now. And if you would like to know what happens next, you can check this title out on Libby. Please join me here next week as I read from the beginning of Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker. Thank you and have a great week.